Vice President Agnew visits Vietnam and tells the troops, "The people back home are proud of you." As the holiday ceasefire ends, new combat deaths raise the number of American dead in Vietnam to more than 40,000 men. President Nixon establishes a council on environmental quality and says the time to end pollution is literally now or never. And in football today, Texas edged Notre Dame 21-17 in the Cotton Bowl, and Mississippi upset Arkansas 27-22 in the Sugar Bowl. Howard?
Also tonight, reports from Bill Gill on the Vice President's trip to Vietnam, Russell Jones on those gunboats arriving in Israel, Peter Jennings on new press censorship in Greece, Gregory Jackson on the big plays in the Sugar Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, Dick Shoemaker on Busby Berkeley, the man behind many of the movie spectaculars of the past, and tonight's commentary on the decade ahead. Frank?
We wish it were otherwise, but the new year begins with a report on the old war. The 24-hour truce declared by the Allies has come to an end, and American and South Vietnamese forces have resumed normal operations on land and in the air. American battle deaths in Vietnam now total more than 40,000. 86 men were killed last week. Despite the Christmas ceasefire, 20 more men were lost than in the previous 7-day period. However, in 1969, the number of Americans killed in action was 5,000 fewer than in 1968. Vice President Agnew visited Vietnam today and told the troops the people at home are pretty darned proud of you. Here is a report on the Vice President's trip to the war zone from ABC's Bill Gill in Saigon.
The usual ceremonies were cut short, with a simple honor guard welcome and no statements before entering the government palace for an hour-and-a-half review of conditions in the Vietnam War. Mr. Agnew then flew by helicopter to an on-the-spot inspection of a carefully selected fire support base some 30 miles north of Saigon. We are told that this base represents the most completely Vietnamized or integrated military base in this section of Vietnam. The Vice President had a few words of familiar advice for the American troops.
I don't really have much to tell you except that people back home are pretty darn proud of you and what you're doing over here. Don't be misled by what you may see and read in certain publications. But I also know that you don't want to see the sacrifices of so many of your buddies that have given their lives and been seriously injured in protecting what we think is the proper course of action for the United States and its world responsibilities, to simply take off and walk away from the situation, leaving your sons and grandsons to finish something that you didn't have the courage to stick with.
Mr. Agnew then visited a second all-American base for some 20 minutes before returning to Saigon for the night. Mr. Agnew's movements here in South Vietnam seem to represent the prime reason for his Asian tour, to learn something of this country and the people who lead it, people he has not known before. For Mr. Agnew will be required to defend the Nixon, Asian, and Vietnamese policies in the upcoming elections, and he himself admits a need for all the education he can get in foreign affairs. This is Bill Gill, ABC News, with the Vice President in Saigon.
Another traveler, the Texas billionaire H. Ross Perot, and his plane load of undelivered Christmas packages for American prisoners of war, arrived in New York today. At a news conference, Perot described his discussions about the prisoners with the North Vietnamese.
They made the complaint that these men had bombed hospitals and schools, and this was one of the reasons they were being held the way they were. And I made the offer to rebuild the hospitals and schools that had been bombed if they would release the men. And as we began to discuss this, I said, well, how many hospitals and schools are we talking about? And at that point, they collapsed. See, because we don't, as a nation, we don't bomb hospitals and schools. Now, we may have, I won't say that a hospital and schools have not been damaged, but the number is small. The second thing they brought up was that we were not displaying the same concern for their men. And so I offered to display the same concern for their men, and we now have teams that are in the prisoner of war camps in the South. And this has made them extremely uncomfortable because, and this gives you some feel for my lack of awareness or sensitivity, I didn't realize that they wouldn't admit that they had men in the camps. They became quite uncomfortable in the conversation, didn't say that. I told them I was going to do it so that they wouldn't have that argument against me. And right now we're collecting letters from North Vietnamese prisoners that are not supposed to exist. And I'll go back to Vientiane with those bags of letters and request to go into Hanoi to deliver mail to their families and help their families put together a comparable package.
Perot urged all those who support his efforts to write to him in Dallas. Armed with those letters, he says, he will make another effort to get into North Vietnam. We'll be back with more news in a moment.
The ABC Evening News with Frank Reynolds and Howard K. Smith is brought to you tonight by Metropolitan Life, the company that protects 1 out of every 5 people in the United States and Canada.
How old are you? How old's your wife? And your children's ages? Of course, you have Social Security. Do you have a company pension? How much life insurance do you have? What will your insurance pay at retirement?
When you give your Metropolitan agent answers to questions like these, he'll put them through our computer and tell you whether your present financial plans are adequate to protect your family, educate your children, and build for retirement. Our computer is incredibly thorough. It provides a choice of custom-tailored plans, and your Metropolitan man helps you choose the one that's just right for you. We call it our Family Security Checkup.
You might even find you're better off than you think.
With 5 French-built gunboats that are supposed to be locked up in Cherbourg, France, now snugly berthed in Haifa, Israel, France today tried to wipe a little more of the red off its face. Yesterday, the French government suspended 2 of its own officials suspected of abetting the ship-napping. Today, it asked Israel to recall Israel's chief arms purchaser in France, Admiral Mordecai Limon. Limon was captain of the famous ship Exodus that carried Jewish refugees illegally to Palestine before Israel came into existence. Meanwhile, in Haifa, ABC's Russ Jones reports how the world's reigning champions of international gung-ho received their prizes.
The ship slid into the harbor as sleekly as if they belonged there. They showed no sign of wear and tear from the long voyage down the English Channel and through the Mediterranean from France. Everything about them was new, especially including their nameplates, which seemed to support the story that the ships belonged to a private company. But most of the men making up the crews looked like teenagers, raising the suspicion that the ships had stopped somewhere nearby to take them on, that someone else had done the actual sailing through the rough winter seas. If so, the names could have been added or changed to suit the occasion. This suspicion was not allayed by the captain of one vessel who was produced at a news conference. Commander Ezra added his little light on other subjects, such as who really owns the ships, how they got out of the French harbor, and what they really will do now. Whatever the truth of the story of the ships, the undeniable fact now is that the Israelis have brought off a spectacular coup, and that they have the potential, at least, of almost doubling their strength in missile-firing vessels. Russell Jones, ABC News, reporting.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
3 comedies spark Thursday night on ABC, starting with The Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
You are the most aggravating, arrogant, outrageous.
Fabulous, fascinating.
Martha, call the plumber right away. Tell him we need him to come and fix the seal in the bathtub.
That Girl.
I want that girl.
Oh, exciting. I feel like a princess. Like it. I love it.
Bewitched.
Just a moment.
Sam? Samantha!
Mother. Who says we can't have everything?
The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, That Girl, and Bewitched. Thursday night on ABC.
The fun begins tonight at 7:30, 6:30 Central Time.
The International Press Institute published its annual review of freedom of the press today. The Institute says South Vietnam is the country with the bleakest prospect for freedom of the press. Well, the prospects for a free press also are not very good in Greece, where January 1st marks more than a new year. ABC's Peter Jennings explains why in this report filmed recently in Athens.
This is the Greek newspaper Tovema, an afternoon daily that, like all others in Greece, has been rigidly censored since this regime came to power in April 1967. Tovema, unlike some other papers, has not been closed down. The beginning of January would be a red-letter time for the editors of Tovema normally, because the government has finally announced that all censorship will be lifted. However, in place of censorship has come a series of press laws that are as oppressive, said one editor, as a full-time watchdog. Each day the paper goes to press, it must avoid, for fear of closure and imprisonment, any subject that revives what the government calls old passions, remarks or reports that say the economy is not blooming, any statement that would encourage people to hold meetings or affect the national integrity. There is a long list of non-persons who may not be mentioned. The list is headed by any Greek who was a politician before the coup d'etat. By the admission of some newspaper editors, pressure, now that the censorship is lifted, is simply more subtle. The paper that people are accustomed to reading may, on any given day in any given part of the country, simply not appear on the newsstands, falling first into the hands of government security agents. Any unfavorable remark about the government could bring economic pressure on a paper that would cause it to fold. Newspaper editors we tried to interview gracefully declined. However, the government position was put forward by the number 2 man in the government, Deputy Premier Patikos. What is the need for continuing censorship of the press?
The set of rules which are to be applied as of January 1st, 1970 was within a law recently passed, which sets out the framework within which the press can move so that it does not hurt the nation. Severity is necessary in order to create responsibility with the persons who are handling the press, who are writing and so on, so that they think of the consequences of doing something wrong. And severity is a basic principle of freedom.
The government maintains that journalistic irresponsibility led to the degree of chaos that existed in Greece before the coup d'etat of 1967. Today, the regime makes sure that what the newspapers have to say is what the government has to say. This is Peter Jennings, ABC News, at the newspaper Tovema in Athens.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
The day you close out your bachelorhood is the day you have to start thinking about life insurance. Because on that day, you stop being a playboy and you start being a provider. If you've just taken that big step, your first move as a provider should be a family security checkup from Metropolitan Life.
It's been beautiful.
When your Metropolitan agent gives you a ring, he's your best man for the job.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tom Jones.
And Tom Jones is super excitement.
To hear you play your music when the sun goes down. Maybe someday you're gonna be a light, saying Johnny be good tonight. Go, 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 go. Love is like candy on a shelf.
Tom Jones makes it happen, love.
With guest stars like Peter Sellers, Richard Pryor, Nancy Wilson, the Bee Gees, Dick Cavett, Pat Paulson, The Fifth Dimension, Dusty Springfield, Sonny and Cher, Donovan.
Help yourself, take a few, that's what I want you to do. It's not unusual
electrifying Tom Jones.
Victor Borger joins Tom Jones tonight on ABC.
The official pronouncements of two world leaders on this first day of the new year are grave warnings for the decade ahead. In Rome, Pope Paul made one of the most impassioned pleas for peace he has ever delivered. He described himself as sorrowful and powerless as he listens to daily news of 3 wars still raging in the world. And he ended by crying out, "Lord, it is true we are not on the right path." And in California, President Nixon was equally stern today as he warned it is, quote, literally now or never in the fight to save our environment. ABC details now from ABC's White House correspondent Tom Jarrell.
The president promised some new approaches to the age-old problem of pollution today. He declined to be specific about them, but he did resolve as a goal for the next decade to try to clean up the air and the water to improve the environment. As an example of the problem, the president pointed to this area of Southern California, where in the conflict between man and nature, pollution is winning the battle. The products of prosperity, like automobiles with their poisonous fumes, he pointed out, breeds pollution, and unless something is done now to protect the water and the air, the president said many areas like this won't be worth living in within 10 years. The president's remarks were made after he signed his first bill of the new year, an act creating a presidential council on environmental quality. He resolved as a major goal for the next 10 years for the country an effort to restore cleanliness to the air and water, adding a note of urgency saying, unless we start now, the damage will be much harder to turn around. So it's clear one of the major goals the president will set in his upcoming State of the Union message will be to combat pollution. This problem is known to be one of growing concern, especially among young people on the college campuses, and the president feels that unless something is done now to stop it, pollution could be the Vietnam of the 70s. Tom Jarrell, ABC News at the Western White House.
Like many other Americans, the president spent the balance of his day in front of a television set watching parades and football. 2 of the big games were the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, where Mississippi beat Arkansas, and the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, where Texas beat Notre Dame. ABC's Gregory Jackson reports on both games.
The wildly publicized Cotton Bowl engagement between Notre Dame and the Texas Longhorns lived up to all advance notices. The lead changed hand 4 times, but it began when Notre Dame took the opening kickoff and drove down for a field goal. At the start of the second quarter, Notre Dame struck again with a 46-yard pass from Joe Theismann to Tom Gatewood, and Notre Dame went ahead 10-0. But before the half, Texas ground out 76 yards, capped by a 1-yard scoring plunge by Jerry Bertelsen, and that was it, the score at the half, 10-7. It wasn't until the fourth quarter that the Longhorns moved ahead with a 2-yard drive by Teddy Coy. But again, Notre Dame took the kickoff and drove down to the 25 and went ahead when Theismann's second touchdown pass was successful, a 24-yard toss to Jim Yoder. The score is now 17-14. It's the fourth quarter. Texas is against the wall, and they pull it off. And Billy Dale pushes it over from the 2. The score is 21-17 in favor of Texas. And the game is all but over when defensiveman Tom Campbell intercepts a last-ditch Notre Dame pass deep in his own territory. With only 27 seconds to go, Texas wins. In the meantime, a dramatic upset was unraveling in the Sugar Bowl. We join the play as Mississippi's Bo Bowen takes off from his own 31 and rambles for 69 yards. Minutes later, Bruce Maxwell for Arkansas tears off 47 yards, but he's stopped and Arkansas fails to score. Still in the first quarter, Mississippi's extraordinary quarterback, Archie Manning, takes over his team's second TD, and the score is 14-0 Mississippi. In the second quarter, Arkansas scores when Bill Burnett takes a pitch out, but his team fails to get the extra point, and it's Mississippi 14, Arkansas 6. After the kickoff, Mississippi's kicker, Cloyce Hinton, booms a 52-yard field goal from his own 4. And just before the half, Mississippi scores again with a 56-yard touchdown pass to Vernon Studdard, and the score at that point is 24-6 Mississippi. Just before the halftime break, Arkansas comes back with a 47-yard pass from Bill Montgomery to Chuck Dickus. Arkansas tries for 2 but fails. Both teams exchanged successful field goals in the third quarter, bringing the score to 27-15 in favor of Mississippi. And then what turned out to be the final score came when Arkansas intercepted a Mississippi pass and ran it down to the 10. 3 plays later, Arkansas scored, but it still wasn't enough, and the upset became a fact. Mississippi 27, Arkansas 22.
We'll have more news in a moment.
We asked people why they save at a savings and loan association. Here's what they told us in Massachusetts.
I've been saving here for 15 years, and I know of no safer place to put my money.
Because it's a good place, that's all.
Certainly beats playing the market. And here are some answers from Georgia.
They're real friendly. They always act like they're glad to see you.
It's almost like having a second income.
From the interest.
When I grow up, I would like to be a chemical scientist.
Well, they're just so nice to me.
And from Minnesota.
They invest heavily in real estate. And real estate is the best investment I know.
Investments are made on a local level.
And here we are in a California savings and loan.
I use interest to buy something wild.
The interest?
Trip to Europe.
Second income.
Me save? Like, wow, man. I just came in for some matches.
Well, I guess what most people feel is that where you save does make a difference.
For some time, the trend in the movies has been toward the so-called adult or X-rated picture. Now a new trend appears to be developing. Revivals of old movies that even the children can see. United Artists is re-releasing one of its big hits of the 30s, Footlight Parade. And ABC's Dick Shoemaker previewed it with the man who made it, Busby Berkeley, a familiar name to the over 40 crowd.
Mr. Berkeley, how do you account for the fact that your movies today are so widely popular overseas and with the young people?
We made an awful lot of good pictures in those days. And my pictures, particularly being musicals, are the spectacular kind, which we haven't seen anything like it in years. So the younger generation's the first time they've seen anything like my spectacular numbers. They've never seen anything like that on the screen before.
By a waterfall, I'm calling you. We can share it all.
I had girls slide down the rocks, and they'd do a lot of tricks in the pool. There's about 60 of them. My objective was to make every shot so interesting and so entertaining that it would hold the audience. Then that would transform itself into a Ziegfeldian pool with gold springboards, and then I would go in for different effects. Berkeley girls became quite famous through the years, and I cared more about beauty, charm, than I did about whether they could dance or not. If a girl had 5 right feet and 1 left foot, well, it was all right with me as long as she was beautiful. I'd teach her how to dance somehow, some way. I pick girls for beauty, pure, unadulterated beauty. People often ask me, Buzz, how do you pick such beautiful girls? Well, I said, I pick them through their eyes. That's where beauty is, in the eyes, because the eyes mirror the soul. Beautiful girls and beautiful settings, and it's what I did with them that made them spectacular. And I have my own, they call it the Berkeley technique, my own way of working. And that I will always follow, because it's always been successful. But if I did a picture today, brother, I'd make them all sit up and take notice.
There's a magic melody, my kill me.
We'll be back in a moment.
It all happens again on the golden age of the automobile.
Tuesday night, January 13th, here on ABC.
The first day of the new year is a good time to change errant ways, which is just another way of saying it is time to carry out long overdue reforms. Howard has a few suggestions. Howard?
Frank, the 1970s are just a few hours old, and what is the most fruitful thing we could do to make them happier than the 60s have been? Well, my specific is to carry out some simple reforms of the Congress. We elect our representatives democratically, but somehow the laws they pass do not respond to our problems. What's wrong? The answer, I believe, is two things. First, the seniority system. Chairmanships of the almighty committees are given automatically to those longest in Congress, men from the most feudalistic districts. In a nation whose average age is close to 30, we are run by men of 70 and 80 years of age. So require our representatives to elect their committee chairmen, not appoint them, and we'll get men more attuned to the people. Second, the costs of getting elected are too high. Special interests pay those costs. Once elected, a representative dare not pass laws regulating those interests, or their money will go to his opponent in the next election. Solution, limit drastically by law what any candidate may spend, and then let the federal government pay those limited expenses. Congress will be liberated from the interests and responsive to us. Those two reforms, end seniority and make election costs cheap, would do more to meet pollution, poverty, crime, and everything else than all the complex reforms one can think of. That, I dare to propose, should be the main mission of the 70s. Frank?
Thank you, Howard. That's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.